On Frida's account, Kay had refrained all day from going to Barnabas's house to make inquiries. In order to avoid receiving Barnabas in Frida's presence, he had laboured out of doors, and when his work was done, had continued to linger outside in the expectation of Barnabas. But Barnabas had not come. The only thing he could do now was to visit the sisters, only for a minute or two. He would only stand at the door and ask. He would be back again soon. So he thrust the shovel into the snow and set off at a run. He arrived breathless at the house of Barnabas, and after a sharp knock, flung the door open and asked, without looking to see who was inside, "Hasn't Barnabas come back yet?" Only then did he notice that Olga was not there, that the two old people, who were again sitting at the far end of the table in a state of vacancy, had not yet realized what was happening at the door, and were only now slowly turning their faces towards it. And finally, that Amalia had been lying beside the stove under a blanket, and in her alarm at Kay's sudden appearance, had started up with her hand to her brow in an effort to recover her composure. If Olga had been there, she would have answered immediately, and Kay could have gone away again. But as it was, he had at least to take a step or two towards Amalia, give her his hand, which she pressed in silence, and beg her to keep the startled old folks from attempting to meander through the room, which she did with a few words. Kay learned that Olga was chopping wood in the yard, that Amalia, exhausted, for what reason she did not say, had had to lie down a short time before, and that Barnabas has not yet indeed returned, but must return very soon, for he never stayed overnight in the castle. Kay thanked her for the information, which left him at liberty to go, but Amalia asked if he would not wait to see Olga. However, she added, he had already spoken to Olga during the day. He answered with surprise that he had not, and asked if Olga had something of importance to say to him. As if faintly irritated, Amalia screwed up her mouth silently, gave him a nod, obviously in farewell, and lay down again. From her recumbent position, she let her eyes rest on him as if she were astonished to see him still there. Her gaze was cold, clear, and steady as usual. It was never levelled exactly on the object she regarded, but in some disturbing way always a little past it, hardly perceptibly, but yet unquestionably past it. Not from weakness, apparently, nor from embarrassment, nor from duplicity, but from a persistent and dominating desire for isolation, which she herself perhaps only became conscious of in this way. Kay thought he could remember being baffled on the very first evening by that look. Probably even the whole hatefulness of the impression so quickly made on him by this family was traceable to that look, which in itself was not hateful, but proud and upright in its reserve. "You are always so sad, Amalia," said Kay. "Is anything troubling you? Can't you say what it is? I have never seen a country girl at all like you. It never struck me before. Do you really belong to this village? Were you born here, Amalia?" Amalia nodded as if Kay had only put the last of those questions, and then said, "So you'll wait for Olga?" "I don't know why you keep on asking me that," said Kay. "I can't stay any longer because my fiancé is waiting for me at home." Amalia propped herself on one elbow. She had not heard of the engagement. Kay gave Frida's name. Amalia did not know it. She asked if Olga knew of their betrothal. Kay fancied she did, for she had seen him with Frida, and news like that was quick to fly round in the village. Amalia assured him, however, that Olga knew nothing about it, and that it would make her very unhappy, for she seemed to be in love with Kay. She had not directly said so, for she was very reserved, but love betrayed itself involuntarily. Kay was convinced that Amalia was mistaken. Amalia smiled, and this smile of hers, although sad, lit up her gloomy face, made her silence eloquent, her strangeness intimate, and unlocked a mystery jealously guarded hitherto. A mystery which could indeed be concealed again, but never so completely. Amalia said that she was certainly not mistaken. She would even go further and affirm that Kay too had an inclination for Olga, and that his visits, which were ostensibly concerned with some message or other from Barnabas, were really intended for Olga. But now that Amalia knew all about it, he need not be so strict with himself and could come oftener to see them. That was all she wanted to say. Kay shook his head and reminded her of his betrothal. Amalia seemed to set little store by this betrothal. The immediate impression she received from Kay, who was after all unaccompanied, was in her opinion decisive. She only asked when Kay had made the girl's acquaintance, for he had been but a few days in the village. Kay told her about his night at the Herrenhof, whereupon Amalia merely said briefly that she had been very much against his being taken to the Herrenhof. She appealed for confirmation to Olga, who had just come in with an armful of wood, fresh and glowing from the frosty air, strong and vivid as if transformed by the change from her usual aimless standing about inside. She threw down the wood, greeted Kay frankly, and asked at once for Frida. Kay exchanged a look with Amalia, who seemed, however, not at all disconcerted. A little relieved, Kay spoke of Frida more freely than he would otherwise have done, described the difficult circumstances in which she was managing to keep house in a kind of way in the school, and in the haste of his narrative, for he wanted to go home at once, so far forgot himself when bidding them goodbye as to invite the sisters to come and pay him a visit. He began to stammer in confusion. However, when Amalia, giving him no time to say another word, interposed with an acceptance of the invitation, then Olga was compelled to associate herself with it. But Kay, still harassed by the feeling that he ought to go at once, and becoming uneasy under Amalia's gaze, did not hesitate any longer to confess that the invitation had been quite unpremeditated and had sprung merely from a personal impulse, but that unfortunately he could not confirm it, since there was a great hostility, to him quite incomprehensible, between Frida and their family. "It's not hostility," said Amalia, getting up from her couch and flinging the blanket behind her. "It's nothing so big as that. It's only a parrot repetition of what she hears everywhere. And now, go away. Go to your young woman. I can see you're in a hurry. You needn't be afraid that we'll come. I only said it at first for fun, out of mischief. But you can come often enough to see us. There's nothing to hinder you. You can always plead Barnabas's messages as an excuse. I'll make it easier for you by telling you that Barnabas, even if he has a message from the castle for you, can't go all the way up to the school to find you. He can't trail about so much, poor boy. He wears himself out in service. You'll have to come yourself to get the news." Kay had never before heard Amalia utter so many consecutive sentences, and they sounded differently from her usual comments. They had a kind of dignity which obviously impressed not only Kay, but Olga too, although she was accustomed to her sister. She stood a little to one side, her arms folded, in her usual stolid and somewhat stooping posture once more, with her eyes fixed on Amalia, who on the other hand looked only at Kay. "It's an error," said Kay, "a gross error to imagine that I'm not in earnest looking for Barnabas. It's my most urgent wish, really my only wish, to get my business with the authorities properly settled. And Barnabas has to help me in that. Most of my hopes are based on him. I grant he has disappointed me greatly once as it is, but that was more my fault than his. In the bewilderment of my first hours in the village, I believed that everything could be settled by a short walk in the evening. And when the impossible proved impossible, I blamed him for it."